You've seen thousands of birds in your life. In your yard, at the park, on the sidewalk, in the trees, and yet you've probably never seen a dead one. Not lying in the grass, not on a branch, not anywhere. Where are they? Birds die every single day, millions of them. Disease, predation, old age, starvation, accidents. The mortality rate of wild birds is extraordinarily high. Studies estimate that roughly 50% of songbirds die in their first year of life. For every cardinal at your feeder this morning, statistically, half of its siblings from last year's brood are already dead. So where are the bodies? This is not a small question. This is one of the most commonly asked questions in ornithology, and the answer is far more specific and far stranger than most people realize. Welcome to Quiet Feeder. Subscribe before you leave, because what you're about to learn will change the way you think about the absence of something you've been noticing your entire life, without ever knowing you were noticing it. Today we're going into why you almost never see dead birds, what actually happens in the final hours and minutes of a bird's life, and where the bodies go. Stay until the end, because the last thing we cover involves a behavior that researchers have only recently documented, and it suggests that some bird species may have something that looks remarkably close to what we would call an awareness of death. Let's start with the numbers, because the scale of this mystery is bigger than most people grasp. North America is home to roughly 7.5 billion land birds at any given time. According to a 2019 study published in the journal Science, the annual mortality rate for adult songbirds averages between 40 and 60% depending on the species. That means that in any given year, somewhere between 3 and 4.5 billion birds die in North America alone. 3 to 4.5 billion. If even a fraction of those bodies remained visible for more than a few hours, you would see dead birds constantly. In your yard, on your street, in every park, on every trail. And yet you don't. The statistical probability that you should have encountered far more dead birds than you actually have is overwhelming. So what's happening to them? The answer has several parts, and the first one is the most straightforward. Birds don't die where you're looking. When a bird is sick, injured, or entering the final stages of life due to age or disease, its behavior changes in very specific ways. Research on avian behavior during terminal illness documented in studies on everything from West Nile virus to avian influenza shows that sick birds become lethargic, disoriented, and most importantly, they seek cover. A healthy bird operates in open or semi-open spaces where it can see predators coming and escape quickly. A bird that knows in whatever way birds know things that it is compromised, that it cannot fly well or react quickly, retreats to the densest cover it can find. Thick underbrush, the interior of a shrub, dense ground vegetation, tall grass, the base of a hedge, places where a predator is less likely to spot it, and places where, if it dies, the body will be concealed from view. This behavior is not conscious strategy the way humans plan. It is instinctive threat response. A bird that cannot escape a predator effectively hides instead, and the place it hides to avoid predators in its final hours is the same place that conceals its body after death. This is why you rarely see dead birds in the open. They are not dying in the open. They are dying in the places you don't look, the places you can't see, into the undergrowth and dense vegetation you walk past every day without a second glance. If you were to push aside the branches at the base of every overgrown shrub in your neighborhood, you would find more dead birds. But you don't do that. No one does. And so the bodies remain hidden, not because they've been removed, but because they were never visible to begin with. But concealment alone doesn't explain the full absence. Because even in places where birds do die in the open on lawns, driveways, sidewalks, the bodies disappear quickly. Research on scavenger efficiency, particularly studies done on urban and suburban bird mortality, shows that the average time a small bird carcass remains visible in an area with active scavenger populations is between 30 minutes and 4 hours. 30 minutes to 4 hours. If the bird dies overnight, which many sick birds do, because nighttime is when their compromised metabolism can no longer sustain body temperature, the body is often gone by the time you wake up. The scavengers that remove bird carcasses are not what most people picture. You're not looking for vultures circling or coyotes dragging away a cardinal. You're looking at much smaller, far more common scavengers. Ants, beetles, flies, and other insects begin working on a bird carcass within minutes of death in warm weather. A single carcass can be stripped of soft tissue by insect activity within hours under the right conditions. But the faster, more complete removal happens because of vertebrate scavengers that most people don't think of as scavengers at all. Domestic cats are one of the most efficient removers of bird carcasses in suburban and urban areas. A study published in the journal Nature Communications estimated that free-ranging domestic cats in the United States kill between 1.3 and 4 billion birds annually. But cats don't just kill live birds. They also scavenge. A dead or dying bird on the ground is an easy meal. And cats patrol territories regularly, often at night, when you're not watching. A cat encountering a dead bird on a lawn at 3 in the morning will remove it. You wake up. The bird is gone. You never knew it was there. Raccoons, opossums, skunks, and foxes, all common in suburban areas and increasingly common in urban ones, are opportunistic scavengers. They don't need the bird to be fresh. They will take a carcass in any stage of decay. Crows and ravens, which are highly intelligent and constantly scanning their territories for food, will take dead birds. Blue jays, which are omnivorous and opportunistic, will scavenge. Even squirrels, which most people think of as nut eaters, will scavenge bird carcasses for protein, especially in winter when other food is scarce. The efficiency of scavenger networks in removing small carcasses is so high that researchers studying bird mortality often have to check locations multiple times per day just to document deaths before the evidence disappears. But there's a third part of this that's less intuitive and more unsettling. Some birds don't leave bodies because they are consumed before they die. Predation is one of the leading causes of death in wild birds, and predation by definition does not leave a visible carcass where you would see it. A sharp-shinned hawk takes a chickadee mid-flight. There's no body on the ground. The hawk carries it to a perch, consumes it, and drops the indigestible parts, bones, feathers, in a location far from where you walk. A Cooper's hawk takes a mourning dove at your feeder. You see an explosion of feathers. By the time you go outside to look, the hawk is gone, and so is the dove. What's left are a few feathers scattered on the lawn, and within an hour, those feathers blow away or get picked up by other birds for nesting material. The evidence of death disappears almost as fast as the death itself happened. Owls are even more efficient. A great horned owl or a screech owl hunting at night takes a sleeping bird from a roosting site. The kill happens in darkness. The owl consumes the bird whole or in large pieces and regurgitates a pellet containing the indigestible parts hours later, often miles away from the kill site. You never see the bird. You never see the predation event. The only evidence is a pellet on the ground under a distant tree, and unless you know what you're looking at, you walk past it without noticing. Mammalian predators, cats, foxes, weasels do the same. They take the bird, they consume it elsewhere. The site of death is cleaned by the predator's own behavior. No body remains. So when you combine these factors, concealment by the dying bird, rapid scavenging of any exposed carcass, and consumption via predation that leaves no remains in visible locations, the statistical probability that you will encounter a dead bird drops dramatically. You would need to be in the right place. A place where a bird died in the open. At the right time, that narrow window between death and scavenger removal, and in a location you actually look at closely, not under brush or dense cover. That combination of factors is rare, which is why your sense that you never see dead birds is accurate. You don't. not because they aren't dying, but because every ecological process that follows death is optimized to remove the evidence quickly. Now let's talk about the part of this question that gets quieter and stranger. The part about whether birds have any awareness of their own death or the deaths of other birds. For a long time, the assumption in ornithology was that birds do not have a concept of death, that they lack the cognitive architecture required to understand mortality as an abstract idea. But research over the past 15 years has begun to complicate that assumption, particularly when it comes to corvids crows, ravens, jays, and magpies. In 2015, researchers at the University of Washington published a study that documented something unexpected. When crows encountered a dead crow, they didn't ignore it. They gathered. Multiple crows would arrive at the site of a dead crow, sometimes dozens of them, and engage in what researchers called mobbing behavior. They would call loudly, circle the body, land near it, and remain in the area for extended periods, sometimes 15 to 20 minutes or longer. The behavior was consistent across different crow populations, and it wasn't predator-directed. The crows weren't mobbing a threat. They were responding to the dead crow itself. What made this even more striking was what happened afterward. The researchers tested whether crows would return to locations where they had encountered dead crows. They did not. Crows that had participated in a mobbing event around a dead crow avoided that location for weeks afterward, even though it was in their territory, and even though food was available there. The presence of a dead crow had marked that location as dangerous. They had learned something from the death. They had updated their understanding of that space. This is not proof that crows understand death in the philosophical sense that humans do, but it is evidence that crows recognize dead crows as significant, that they respond to death with specific, repeated behaviors, and that encountering a dead individual changes their future behavior. That is not nothing. Other corvid species show similar behaviors. Magpies have been observed bringing grass and placing it near the bodies of dead magpies, a behavior that has no obvious survival function and looks to human observers like something closer to mourning. Western scrub jays, according to research from the University of California, Davis, will stop caching food and increase alarm calling when a dead jay is nearby, behaviors that suggest heightened vigilance and social communication about the death. Whether these behaviors should be called funerals or grief or rituals, researchers are careful about those words. They carry human emotional and cultural weight that may not apply. But what is not in question is that these birds are doing something. They are not ignoring death. They are responding to it in ways that are consistent, socially coordinated, and behaviorally complex. For most songbirds, the evidence is thinner. There are reports not yet fully documented in controlled studies of cardinals or robins remaining near a dead mate for hours, calling, returning repeatedly, behaving in ways that suggest something is wrong that they don't quite understand. Whether that reflects genuine distress, confusion, or continued pair bonding behavior that hasn't yet updated to reflect the partner's absence, we don't know. What is clear is that most small songbirds don't engage in group responses to dead individuals the way corvids do. Whether that reflects a cognitive difference, a social structure difference, or simply the reality that a small bird cannot afford to spend energy on behaviors that don't directly serve survival, that question is still open. Here's what I want you to take from all of this. The absence of dead birds in your daily experience is not an accident. It is the result of overlapping systems predator avoidance that drives dying birds into concealment, scavenger efficiency that removes exposed carcasses within hours, and predation itself that consumes birds before bodies can appear. The question of where dead birds go has a specific, observable answer. They go into dense cover. They go into the stomachs of scavengers. They go into the talons and beaks of predators. They are processed by insects, by bacteria, by the same quiet decomposition systems that handle every living thing that dies. They disappear not because of mystery, but because of ecology. And yet, for some species, there may be something more happening. A recognition. A response. A behavior that suggests death is not just processed as absence, but as presence. The presence of something that other birds notice, gather around, and in some way remember. The next time you sit by your window and watch the birds come and go, the chickadee on the suet, the juncos scratching in the leaves below, the cardinal waiting in the branches, know that you are only seeing part of what is happening. They're there. They've always been there. You're just not looking in the right places at the right times. And the systems that absorb them are faster and more efficient than your ability to notice. Tell me in the comments, have you ever found a dead bird? Where was it? What species? How long do you think it had been there? I read every comment. I'd love to hear about it. And if this kind of quiet, honest look at the birds around you is something you want more of, subscribe. There's always something worth noticing here. I'll see you in the next one.